It was then when
Thank you guys for completely pulling the rug out from underneath anything I've got to say.
No, all right, finish the story.
Really
we want to hear the story,
oh my
okay?
God. I can't follow that. I mean, what am I going to do?
Yes, you can. Well, okay, so we got to the part where she pulled you over.
She pulls me over. She's
Yeah.
like,
Money zombies chasing empty riches. Mindless robots passively comply. We're white blood cells fighting this war, restoring balance, responsibility, family, community, and environment. Reject corruption. Reclaim your humanity. Welcome to the White Blood Cells podcast.
are we recording?
Yeah, we're rolling. Why, do you not want us to post
No,
this?
I was just about to just throw some people under the bus here. So I want to make sure that I phrase this properly.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right?
Make sure you throw the right people under the bus.
This isn't going to throw anybody under the bus that doesn't have it coming. The bottom of the barrel is to get a real estate license. Right? When all else has failed, you get a real estate license. Right? And coaching is somewhere in there because, dude, it's such a popular iteration. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
tread lightly. John's here.
I know,
he's a coach.
John's here. He's a coach. I know. We're all coach. I mean, essentially, I'm writing a book about emotional intelligence, so we're all in this.
Right.
We're all in this realm together, I think, right?
Yeah.
I'm not discounting my involvement in it either. It's just like it's the order of the day, I think, because it's such a popular thing online. Like
those who can't do teach.
They teach, exactly. Yeah. And I think there's no question that's like, you know, I mean, if you're good at it, then you're obviously going to rise to the top, which is true of realtors too. The guys that are good at it and work hard at it, they become really successful and they make a lot of money.
A load of money.
But it's the 80-20 rule, right? I mean, there's only 20%. I think it's more like 90-10 is really what that boils down to. Mm-hmm. But I think I think the employment situation per the mainstream media mainstream media says unemployment is like still 4%, which is bullshit. Yeah. It's not even close to that. There's massively underreported numbers there.
Mm-hmm. How often are you watching the news? Because, I mean, I would say I don't watch the news whatsoever, and I don't have any of these concerns that you guys are talking about.
What concerns are we talking about?
Well, I'm saying, like, you're saying that there's a health concern. People are obviously, like, you know, worried about, they're stressed, they have anxiety and all these other kind of things, right? Yeah. And then you have the concerns of unemployment or jobs or whatever that might be. And I think for me, I'm like, man, I don't think about any of that stuff because I just don't watch. We don't have mainstream media on at the house at all, like ever. Yeah. Like I never have like a Fox or MSNBC or CNN or anything on the TV. So, and we don't even turn our TV on until typically like Friday night. We do like family movie night.
Yeah.
And then we have Screen Free Sunday, except for usually in the afternoon, I'll like put on an old Western or something like that while I'm cooking and whatnot. But yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Screen Free Sunday. Yeah.
Mark the health nut.
I don't know.
No, dude, that's
like,
really
what
good.
What would you do other than putting on the TV?
Total self-fulfilling prophecy, and you're totally right. If you think negative things, then you're gonna get negative things. And you're right. The TV is constantly throwing negative things. I turn on the TV every morning when I get up and I eat some breakfast, and I'm watching CNBC. It's stock stuff. I've done that for like 25 years. I just watch that. And in part, I just like to be educated so that I can talk to the other people, my clientele, about whatever's going on with the market, because it seems like a relevant, thing to be able to chat people up about. I like to, I'm an economics major, so I kind of like to know generally too. There's one thing that media system is like they're putting this veil out there for us to all believe is true. And then there's a real thing going on somewhere, and that's a whole myriad of stuff behind that somewhere, and that's what I'm talking about. The cool thing is that YouTube has introduced a lot of really smart people to do podcasts or their own kind of reporting on this stuff, which that's really the cool stuff that I like to watch during the day, and uncover and see the comparison between what Jim Cramer on
Yeah,
CNBC
because what's
is
the
telling you?
agenda that Jim has, right? There's an element of like he's getting paid by somebody who then in turn, says you can or cannot say X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right. So, but I feel like for the most part, and this can't happen on YouTube as well, but there's an element of it being like less people who have YouTube channels or podcasts or things like that are not as bought by the media. They might have sponsors and things like that, but there's not like an oligarch of controllers.
Yeah. I saw this analysis on Jim Cramer and how often he's wrong. He's wrong way more than he's right. And he's wrong hugely. I saw a chart of a whole analysis of should we listen to Jim Cramer. He's an idiot. He's a moron. I mean, if you just...
Well, now you have enough data, right? Like he's been on for 20 years or something.
Right.
But he's just like loud and obnoxious.
Yeah,
and,
he's good media.
Yeah, exactly. He's entertaining.
He's a perfect character. I'm so glad that we just segued right into what like Jim Cramer. And I'm sorry, I know I planted the seed because I said it, but like the fact that you've just watched this, he's totally wrong all the time. This motherfucker is just, excuse my whatever. I know that I got the world's biggest Bible thumper over there. I got to throw an F-bomb sometimes.
Fine.
This guy is, okay, so do you guys know what the definition, I call him a windsock, right?
A windsock?
A wind sock,
Okay,
like
yeah.
at the airport. Which way is the wind blowing?
Yes.
This guy is the best wind sock that Jim Cramer, where are you? You're a wind sock. You're nothing more. And you're also, do you guys know what a sycophant is?
No. I feel like I'm going to.
Can I
Seems
describe it
inappropriate.
in the Wedowers? This isn't the Webster's definition.
This is
the
the Wedowers?
This is the Wedower dictionary
Wait,
definition. A sycophant is a man with very good knee pads.
How do
All
we
right.
go from...
There's a more highbrow definition of it. Jim Cramer is the world's biggest sycophant. Okay, he is just
On his knees.
He's just cheerleading for
Right.
every major Fortune, 100 company. You don't need to cheerlead the bully in the room, right?
Right.
That's what really drives me nuts about this guy. And I watch him every morning because he's kind of entertaining.
Yeah.
And I want to see what these people, because millennials love this dude because they think he's right. all the time.
He's wrong. And he wears bad shirts. And he
And
doesn't
he
roll them up,
rolls
right?
them up to his.
It's such a
And he's like
windsock.
5'1".
He's little, yeah.
He's tiny. He's just a tiny man with a
He's
big
probably
mouth.
a billionaire because
He's
good
there's no
media.
question he's a billionaire because he has good knee pads. And people with good knee pads get paid by the guy they're doing it to, right?
This is a real confusing visual for me.
Sorry.
He's a windsock and knee pad.
I love you tried to shut me down early on this too about how many analogies that I like to use.
I like it.
But the windsock thing is perfect too because like he is so good at turning around. He'll reference something good he said a long time ago and he'll pull that video and bring it to the front when he's called the bottom in 2009 or he was hanging out with the guy who called the bottom in 2009. So look at me, I'm great. He will never tell you about all the times he was wrong, and those magically get pushed somewhere where they'll never get seen. But I think you're totally right. I think he's wrong way more than he's right, and yet he is held to some standard on that show and probably in a lot of people's minds in this country because he's just perfect at like playing whichever way that wind is blowing.
Well, and if he's the windsock for the Fortune 100, as you say, then that's why. Right? That's why he's propped up.
That's what I'm saying.
Because that's the they.
That's the they. And that's that's what's so funny about all of this. Jamie Dimon is another guy who I brought up a while back. He's the CEO of Chase Bank, and he made some reference to recently about we really needed to do this house cleaning stuff, and he's jumping on the Trump bandwagon with this whole house cleaning bit, and my buddy keeps saying, I think he's really good. I'm like, well, where was this guy? Because he was the CEO of Chase Bank like 3 years ago, too. Where was he then? Why wasn't he saying that stuff then? All these guys are just like, which way is this wind blowing today? And now I'm going to jump on that, and we're going to just follow that bandwagon thing. I don't like all these guys to me are just like, they're just sellouts. They're just following the direction of the wind. I don't know. I mean, it's frustrating to me because it's just laughable.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a lot to say to this because I'm in Mark's camp. I mean, I have Roku, but there's no NBC, there's no Fox, there's no. I catch up when I go to Planet Fitness and work out, and they have all the TVs that inject into me what I don't want to be injected into me. I can't not watch them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my news comes from YouTube, the specific channels that I use and stuff. But I do know about Jim Cramer. How can you not?
Well, that's funny because a lot of people that I talk to have no idea who he is. So I'm surprised and impressed that you know.
Well, because he's a subject of some of the YouTube channels that I watch that are talking about talking about what's really going on,
Yeah. And in that regard, like, I just like, maybe this is a segue to that I just want to touch on this topic because we talk about they so much. And I mentioned this earlier when we were talking, and this has, and I've mentioned this to you too before, like, it's hard to get a man to understand something when his paycheck depends on him not understanding it, right? And so we're all kind of, subject to that problem that we exist in this system where we're employed by an employer. We're like, we have to make dollars to go get a cheeseburger, or whatever, So we're all kind of complicit in that system, and depending on your exposure to it, we effectively become the they, right? Depending on your level of exposure to it.
Well, and I think that everybody, I guess, if you don't watch out, you will easily become a they, right?
Yeah.
Because at some point you start liking the promotion, and you start liking the money, and you start liking the lifestyle that you've built up, and then all of a sudden, that if that gets threatened, or if someone below you questions that, then you must stamp them out because now your power is too much.
Yeah, and I don't think we become necessarily. I mean, we can become the they in that scenario. I don't think we are right away though. But if we don't guard it, we could become. But what we're doing more accurately, and I don't know if this is semantics or not, but we're facilitating their agenda. Right, if we're just going along to get along, all that kind of stuff, and we don't have any moral compass.
Right.
I mean, this is right back to the heart of white blood cells, right?
Yeah.
But I saw, speaking of YouTube, I saw YouTube where this doctor was getting interviewed, a pediatrician. I was surprised at how little they make.
Pediatricians?
Yeah, this guy made like $130,000 a year. Oh. I mean, that's poverty level at this point, practically, right?
In Denver, it is.
Yeah, in Denver for sure. But he was saying that he could have, he didn't, but if he would have administered vaccines to the kids, and he went back and looked at his files at how many patients he had, he would have had $1.5 million added to his salary in about a year and a half. I mean, what the hell are we? I mean, the whole insanity of this thing. I mean, it just threw me right back to I conveniently don't remember COVID very much, on a day-to-day basis. But if there was actually a virus that actually was harmful to people and could kill you and was like a plague and could wipe out mankind or whatever, how hard would I have to sell a vaccine, a cure?
Right.
If it really was a cure and there really was a disease that could kill you, I wouldn't have to sell it.
You wouldn't have to sell it. They'd come running.
I wouldn't have to incent doctors to administer it. What the fuck?
That's the best point. But there's another point that's underneath that too, that I think that who paid for those vaccinations?
We did.
Well, that's the thing is we did. I know, but nobody ever talked about that.
Right.
How does that get slipped under the rug and nobody?
Well,
but
it's the same thing that's going on with this whole Doge thing with the government, right? It's like all this waste and all this spending, and now it's being exposed, and at least on the left side of things, right? They're trying to be like, oh well, look, so and so's lost their job, but it's like, yeah, but this person they weren't doing anything. It's like it's a complete waste.
Well, but even if they were doing something, they're doing transgender studies on porcupines and Aboriginal. I mean, what the? So having a job, when that becomes your religion, speak of no moral compass, right?
Yeah.
No white blood cell to like it's that's your rudder. I mean, that used to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, since when is not having a job or somebody lost their job? Well, good. Get them to do something that's fucking worthwhile.
Well, that's why I originally brought up the whole thing about the theft stuff, right? That paragraph, and I want to post that again. Maybe we can do that in the post edit to show, because dude, that's at the heart of this. But then the other thing is this live and let live ideology that's been kind of like forced upon us for like 50 years in this culture. Like, you know, like everybody's entitled to their own lifestyle, and you don't have if you're a progressive, it's okay to, you know, force your lifestyle on other people. But if you, God forbid, you're a conservative and you're trying to enforce your ideology, that is not going to work. Conservatism in its true sense. I don't mean some whatever weird thing we've done to manipulate that. I mean conservatism, I should say. Conserving things and conserving good ideas and conserving things from the past that worked.
Well, I think the big problem, and I think the reason why it's thrown out is because I really think religion did a really bad job of representing itself, you know, in the sense of, I think that a religion was trying to push a lot of rules on people and control and manipulate people.
Yeah.
And so because of that, people who wanted to break free from religion, they were like, well, screw that. I'm going to throw out all this stuff and I'm going to go to the other side. And then people have their own trauma story of the priest that molested them, or the nun that beat their knuckles every day, or, you know, the pastor that had an affair, or whatever it was that destroyed their faith in Christ. And so then they want to be like, the church sucks and religion sucks, and all the great things that come along with that, as far as like family, community, and, you know, the 10 commandments of doing the right thing when no one's watching, and all these other kind of things get thrown out too. And then it's just like, well, do what you want, when you want, how you want it. And we don't want any of this conservatism / religion.
Right.
You know?
No, that's exactly why whenever I'm talking to somebody, I tread lightly into this territory all the time. And I always talk about, I've been reading the Bible a lot more, and I always reference that. And I try to distinguish that from religion, because I know how polarizing to say religion is. Just like what you were saying about, if you start bringing up Jesus, there's certain words that are
well,
words.
I think Jesus is triggering for a whole other reason than just religion.
You're right. Each word has its own reason for it being a trigger point.
Jesus is a trigger because he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me.
So he's been a trigger for like a couple thousand years, right? So, but like more recently, I think you're totally right about the church and religion, because they're power centers. They're attempting to create their own little influence, their web of influence. And so you're right. I think to that end, those institutions have manipulated the biblical, the real roots of what the Bible.
Well, because you still have flawed people, humans, men who are a part of, you know, this. So not everyone's going to always get it right.
Right.
You know?
But that's why the Bible is constantly advocating for righteousness, right? And forgiveness and all those qualities.
Joy, peace,
right.
patience, kindness, gentleness,
Thank
faithfulness, goodness. You know, I can keep going on, but
preach, brother, preach. No, but the moral compass is necessary to keep. And that's why I keep saying, like, Donald Trump never talks about, like, the one thing that I don't like about Donald Trump is he's never saying, like, it's up to you guys too. I can't sit up here and solve all these problems. He's always saying, I can solve all these problems, and here's how I'm going to do it. A good leader would be delegating that authority down to everybody, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
And so, and he would at a bare minimum say, like, you guys at a bare minimum should go out and educate yourself about the things that are really the most necessary to understand, which I think really is, I've been thinking about this a lot too, like religion, not in the terms that we were talking about, like religion generally,
faith,
philosophy, faith, and law, the real law. I think those things are all tied together.
Yeah.
And we as men don't get an education about any one of the, like, there's no formal method with which we're going to get educated. Thankfully, you had a dad who was telling you, sit down and read that Bible, right? And so,
I mean, thankfully, I had good friends in my life that were also pursuing that, because my dad did it in a way that was very aggressive and that probably would have pushed me away from the church.
Yeah.
Once I turned 18, I would have bounced and been like, screw
Really?
religion, because, you know, I never saw the loving part of it.
So what part did you see? Just the rules and the...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, spare the rod, spoil the child was my dad's motto.
Okay.
So, and then, you know, the church we grew up to as you know, as a kid, the church we went to was all about how you looked. And, you know, if your hair was cut right, you're wearing a suit on Sundays. You didn't listen to music. You didn't go to movies. You know, you didn't cuss. You didn't smoke. You didn't chew. And you didn't hang out with girls that do, you know?
Right. Wow. What kind of church?
It was a legalistic fundamentalist Baptist church.
Okay. Wow.
So, yeah. But it, you know, I think there was a foundation there that I was put on me as far as having to read Bible verses and memorize things. And I think all those things were good, because truth is truth, no matter where it comes from, right? Like whether it comes via a wrong place or a good place, if it's truth, it's still good.
Right. No, I think you're right. And you guys have probably never read this book. I'm a tennis player, so I've read Andre Agassi's book and his history. Have you guys ever? Andre Agassi's dad was a tyrant, right? And he made him play tennis. He built a tennis court in his backyard. And Andre Agassi, as a young kid, was like hated tennis, but his dad kept making him play. His dad was a boxer from like Middle East somewhere, and he just was insistent. He's like, you're going to be a tennis player, and you're going to hit that ball machine every fucking day, and you're going to do it whether or not you like it. And he sent him to academies and stuff. And I mean, he was I'm kind of drawing the parallel between your dad and him. And his dad passed away sometime after Andre retired from tennis, but his book was basically told that whole history. And then went back to say that, like, I would never have been the guy I am if it wasn't for him. And so, like, I think the paths that we take to get there, like, there's a lot of weird ways we get there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, too, because I always question this as a younger person, you know, like, thinking about, like, oh, why do bad things happen to good people? And you know, you see all this like sadness and hurt in the world, and oh, why couldn't God just, you know, make it like perfect, right? And originally he did make it perfect, right? But then you had, you know, the story of Adam and Eve in the garden and man falling and being separated from God. And then you see kind of, it's been interesting, you know, I'm still on this 90-day Bible, read the whole Bible in 90 days kick, and I'm almost done here. But, you know, you see all these things that are happening, you know, and the Israelites are, you know, doing good, and then they're doing bad, and God's upset with them, and, you know, whatnot. But I think there's this element of, like, in the Bible, it says all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And so I see that, like, because of sin and a fallen world that we live in, right? My dad was physically abusive, and he wasn't very loving, and he was a jerk, right? But then God took that and he made it into something, you know, good. And, you know, there's verses that talk about that he makes beauty from ashes, you know, and so I think that when I look back, and now that I'm more mature, I can, and even in each and every day, I can say, like, okay, why is this happening? What can I learn from this situation, and how can I grow in this situation? And then knowing that no matter what happens, that like God will use it for good, you know?
Well, and good wouldn't exist without evil too, right? You have to have this duality. Otherwise, what would be the point? If it was just all good, we'd be boring as shit. Wouldn't it? Seriously, like what would you have? What would you have to, in terms of purpose? What would you have to give yourself contentment and fulfillment? Mm-hmm. You have to have something to push against. I don't know if I'm educated enough to like really answer this question articulately like I would like to, but I think in some ways that
at the end of everything, and when all this world has gone away, and that we're all, with God, right, in perfect energy and light and like just goodness, right? Like I don't think we'll be thinking about, oh, the good or the bad, or thinking about, oh, this is awesome, but I really would like to do this bad thing. I don't think it's going to be so overwhelming and perfect that we'll just be at peace,
Do you think that that's true, or that's just a carrot that we imagine so it gives us something to go chase after, right? I mean, we have to have something to chase after. So even if it's, I don't know if that's true or not. We'll never know.
We will know.
Shouldn't say never.
Yeah, at some point, we're going to be absent from the body and present in heaven, and then it'll be like, all right, is your name written in that book? Are you coming in? I'll be like, Ted, no.
Don't come in here.
No, I'll be like, no, come in here. Why did you not choose?
Don't come to the light. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think I know, and I would say that is the end. At the end, that's what's going to take place, and I don't know if it's necessarily a carrot, but it's if you think about where we came from, right? Like, and we've kind of talked about this, like what was the beginning and what was the cause that caused everything, so, and again, I don't think God is a person. I don't think he's a dude up in heaven with like a lightning bolt and a beard. Like, I think God, in the Old Testament, when Moses said, like, who should I tell the Egyptians who sent me? God said, I am. Like, tell them that I am sent you. Like,
the existence.
Yes, like like that's who he said he was. And so there's an element of like God is almost uncomprehensive. Like we can't. I think that's the biggest thing that as humans that get us into trouble with all these other kind of things is we try to put God in a box and understand him and articulate him and be like, this is God. And it's like, I don't think we can really do that. And that's where all this complexities and failures and mucking up all the waters comes from, because we're trying to identify God or put him into a box. Like what you said
about the dot in the middle of the blackboard, right?
Yeah.
We can't possibly. Did you guys watch the 200 IQ guy that I sent you?
Oh yeah, the smartest man in the world who's like a trash man or something like that.
He looked like he worked at Burger King or something, didn't he? But that guy, I mean, it was really cool. I don't know. I thought that was a kind of a cool description of it. It makes a lot of sense.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That God is this, like what you're saying, is all encompassing. It's like,
well, what was it? Isaiah 45:7 that said they've changed it, which is interesting, right? In the latest King James version.
Really?
But originally it said, I think it's 45:7 that says, I God create all, including evil, including the devil. And this place is a place of duality. I mean, I'm always looking at cause. That's my coaching. This is what I do.
Yeah. All right, coach us.
But
since the 90s, come on, give us a good articulate answer.
90s, way before that. But oh yeah,
you've been studying since the 90s.
Right.
So you're
he's a full-time student.
Right. No, but yeah, I think fundamentally what we're saying here is that this place is duality. And the other place, the when we shed the body and we go hang out with God, in the perfection, there's no duality, and that's the whole point. And that's why it kind of, getting back to religion and stuff, when you say, if I get the story exactly right, and I get the person I'm supposed to worship exactly right, and I'm okay, and I'm saved, and if I get it wrong, oh, sorry, no, sorry. That doesn't work. And is Jesus the way? Sure. If you think he is. Yeah. But I just think it's the duality and I mean, we judge so fast, right? That's what causes all the problems, all the conflicts, everything. And I just can't help but think that our higher self, our God self, is kind of not like mocking, but sort of laughing when we go through these humongous problems. I mean, even things that are catastrophic here, right? I just don't think they are at all from a bigger perspective, because I really believe Is there evil? Yes, certainly. How can you not think there's evil, right? But I think that everything here, I think the truth, the biggest white blood cell we can do, and however you get here is however you get here, right? But everything happens for us. Nothing happens to us. Victim is the biggest lie. And victim comes from instant judgment, from right and wrong. Jesus is the way, Muhammad's wrong. You know, I mean, all of that duality, all of that black and white thinking. I think the true God is just going like, oh, what you guys really?
Right. No, that victimhood thing is another really interesting characteristic that just keeps you in that just absolutely blinded state of mind, right?
Well, hate Trump or love Trump or Trump's the savior or, I mean, nothing like that, right? I mean, it's just, it's so false, the duality. Like this group of people I have to hate because they like Trump. Yeah.
But that's how they, like, there are certain people that must be really susceptible to that that victimhood mindset, you know, and once they get really addicted to it, it's hard to snap them out of it. But one thing I was thinking, either one of you chime in on this. How much does the Bible talk about humor? I know that a couple episodes ago we talked about humor a lot. I don't know that I've crossed any biblical conversation about sense of humor all that much.
Jesus was a funny dude. Like if you really start reading into the New Testament and like looking into his personality of like how he answered people with certain questions and things like that, like I think he had a good sense of humor.
Thank God and Jesus, right? Because how can you, that's my point, is like I was thinking through this the other day, is like how can you, if you, and this is the big if, is like if you know that we're flawed people, we are sinners, we're flawed, we're not perfect, then how, I meant to bring this quote too, about your sense of humor. God gave us a sense of humor to something. There's a good quote about this, and I blew it in not bringing it up. You get on it, producer Mark.
Yeah, I know.
But if you can't be self-deprecating and have a sense of humor about that, you're doomed to this closed-minded, you'll never be able to open up to the other things that you could possibly see by just giving some levity to your lack of knowledge or lack of of being a perfect person.
Back to the root cause again, right? I'm always going there, but Mark could speak to this really well, I'm sure. But it's, I mean, doesn't that come from? I mean, isn't humor easy when you think you know that you're an infinite divine being and you're just put in this meat suit for a few years and you get to play and stuff? I mean, you start to not be all that serious about anything, but yet there are things that really matter here.
Yeah.
Like morality, like being a white blood cell if you're a man, all that kind of stuff. I mean but I would argue that that's all that matters. Like who won the election? I mean, how can you really get wrapped around the axle or create an identity around who you vote for? I mean, that just fundamentally comes from not understanding who and what you are.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things that do matter, and I think it's just this balancing act. I think it's just a constant, like, I hate to say it so, like, a tightrope walk is a bad analogy, too, because it implies that it's so, there's little margin for error. I think there's a lot of margin for error, but I think it's constantly trying to balance out the things that are serious and necessary, like righteousness and forgiveness and love and all those sorts of things that are important, and then treating that with a sense of levity too, and that you don't have all the answers. You don't have hardly any answers. Most of it is finished.
Right.
Per Jesus's statement of it is finished. And so you got to kind of like navigate that territory thoughtfully in that duality system, understanding that there's this dual system.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. That we live in a dualistic plane or whatever. This plane of existence is all about duality and right, wrong, black, white, and you can't understand hot without having cold. Right.
Yeah,
so it's just the conditions but in the end, it's ultimately false because it's not who and what we are. we come from the unity of Christ. And I think that's what people tap into. When you see these people that were all strung out on drugs and they just had no moral fiber at all, and they're just doing everything awful, and then they find Jesus. I mean, I think that's really real. But what they're tapping into is the unity that he brings.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think it is
It is finished.
But then what would you say as far as like, what is the, if it all doesn't matter, if everything means everything, like, then where does right and wrong come in? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Like, where does that morality or anything else? It's like, oh, if it doesn't matter, like, we're just a meat suit traveling on a plane, like a being of energy that's just going to get sucked up into eternity, and it does nothing. None of it matters.
Well, I don't go that far. I mean, that none of it matters. I think it matters deeply here, but I think the biggest thing that we're doing here is trying to remember who we really are. And if we do remember who we really are, that we're created in the image and likeness, that we are creators made in the image and likeness of the divine creator, then what we've assumed here with all our laws and all our society and the cops and the registration and all of it is that we're basically fuck-ups. And if left to our own devices, we're just going to be wild and uncivilized, and we're going to
Which has been the trend throughout society, right? Like, if you go back, people just invaded, killed, murdered, raped, and conquered, and done that over and over and over, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's now, and I don't think that's true now. And this book, don't believe everything you think, speaks to this really elegantly. And so if he's making an argument for not overthinking, basically what the whole school system, the whole Rockefeller school system, which is also our medical system at this point, is designed to get us into our head and away from our heart. And as soon as we get into our heart, that's where God is. That's where intuition is. So it's hard to answer your question, man.
Yeah.
But,
no, I
but what comes to mind is, so what he's advocating instead of thinking is following intuition. And when you follow intuition, you align with your heart. That's where God is. And you just do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when you quit overthinking, because you've been trained to since you were pre-K, right?
Yeah.
And you get out of your left brain by overthinking, you will do the right thing. You will help the old lady across the street. You will, if you become wildly prosperous, you're going to figure out ways to give it away. That's just what you do. And if enough of us do that, then the jerks that don't want to do that will just, they'll be so marginalized that they won't even matter anymore. So it's like, do you believe in God because somebody tells you, because your dad tells you, look, son, this is what's going to make you worthwhile? I think what your dad, I mean, wonderful what your dad did, I guess. It turned out well, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can have him on the show sometime, maybe. We've reconciled our differences.
Right. But I think a better way to go at this point is the assumption that you're wonderful. And let's just bring that out. And let's let you get curious about the word. And then let's study the crap out of it. But to shove it down your throat and I don't know, man. I'm confused about this too. Like there's so many wonderful musicians that say that I was so mad at my mom, at my dad, whatever. They made me practice every day for 5 years. I didn't want to go. And then all of a sudden, and now there's this, they're hugely accomplished and they're giving their gift to the world and it's wonderful. And they thank that parent that was an asshole that made them practice, So I don't know. Yeah.
I guess I'm trying to come back to the conversation about just the duality and, it's like, oh, well, we should just follow our hearts, right? But I would argue that the heart of man is evil. Like, and I think we've seen that throughout history and society. When a man is left to his own devices and without any type of, guidance, that he's going to choose wrong,
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess it's hard to reconcile to say where does that go as far as like you were saying, like how do we get the masses to be enlightened to this, because at the end of the day, people are hungry for power. They're hungry for, their lust of their eyes and their heart, and like all these other kind of things. It seems like even one of the guys in the Bible, David, who was considered a man after God's own heart, like he was a terrible person, It's like he like slept with his friend's wife and like had that guy put out in the front of the lines and get killed, and like he did all these terrible things. Yet God said, "Oh, this is a man after my heart," because David was somebody who would always come back to God and put God, first, and knew that like his creator was there and that he loved him, and like he wanted to do the right things, even though his mind was willing, but his body was weak,
Right. So why don't we talk about that? I mean, how do you? So I'm not. First of all, I'm not preaching a nihilistic type. Nothing matters. Let's just, if it feels good, do it. The whole '60s mantra, right? I'm not advocating that at all. I think stuff really does matter here, but I think the overall agenda is that we're trying to remember who we really are in a non-dualistic state.
Yeah, but who are we?
Well, that's what I'm wanting to talk about.
Yeah,
because you make a really good point. I mean, we have. But I mean, way before media and all the other stuff we talk about, we rape and pillage and plunder and all that. So is that because this really is the devil's realm? I mean, earth, or are we? So I've heard it said by people much smarter than me that everything is either an expression of love or an effort, no matter how unskilled, to get love. Like even and if you boil it down, and I've seen some really emotional therapy sessions with a woman who got raped, is the one I'm thinking about right now, and she came to a point where she genuinely forgave her perpetrator and felt sorry for him, felt like he was to do that act. To rape an innocent child, you got to be way worse off emotionally, being just emotionally bankrupt, no love in your life, than the victim.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it all comes around to love. But we do rape and plunder and pillage, and we take over. And I mean, we're here because of that, like everybody else is, right? So how do we do it?
Well, again, and I think this is why it's controversial, and this is why, again, I don't want to make this episode about, Christianity or Jesus or whatever, but again,
it is what it is, right?
It is what it is, and we're talking about this specific thing, and I think what it is, right, is that yes, we live in a fallen world, right? Satan has taken over, and he's trying to steal as many souls as possible for eternity because he's already lost the battle, right? But it really comes back to like really understanding like what is the good news or what is the gospel, right? It's that God created man, right? God is an infinitely perfect, holy being, right? He's unfathomable. He's perfect, right? So there can be no imperfectness in his presence, right? He can't. It's like if you take a glass of milk and you just put a little bit of red food dye in there, it dilutes the whole thing. It ruins the entire glass of milk, right? What was once pure and white now is pink and it's off colored, right? And so God, being this perfect, infinite being, right? He can't be around us because we're imperfect. And so the two can't coexist. And so this is where the beautiful part of it is that he loved us so much. It was like, I love this being that I created in my own image. I love them so much. How do I make a way to be with them, right? And this is where he sends Jesus to say, because all wrong, right, needs to be righted. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah,
Right. All wrong needs to be right. And so there's laws, right? And so this is why in the Old Testament you had the Israelites sacrificing animals, because there's a consequence for sin, and the consequence of sin is death. And so they had to sacrifice animals to cover to do a covering for the wrong that they did. And so that's what ultimately Jesus did, is he was God, 1 and 3, the Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. He was God, came into man as a human being, lived a sinless life, and became that ultimate sacrifice for humanity. And so now when God looks at me, he doesn't see Mark. He doesn't see like all the things that I've done wrong, the women I've checked out and lusted after, all this kind of stuff. No, because I've accepted Jesus into my life and my heart, and I've said, I can't do anything good on my own, and I need Jesus to be that ultimate sacrifice for me. And so now I'm covered with, Jesus's goodness. And so when God looks down, he sees Jesus and not my sinful nature. And then when I die and I knock on those gates of heaven, it's going to be like, oh yeah, you're Jesus. You're Jesus's, chosen one. Come on in,
Right.
You're a part of this, thing. And so I think with humanity and all this kind of stuff, it's like we're broken, and everyone's going to want to sin and want to fulfill their flesh and their gratification, and there's going to be lawlessness.
This is like we've made this assumption that people are flawed sinners to begin with, which they are. But I think, and here's part of the problem, is the backdrop of what we're living in a ridiculously abundant oriented culture, right? Like everybody on planet Earth right now has food is readily accessible, with some rare exceptions, with some corners of the world.
There's no
right?
want.
There's no want. And so in that environment, what do they say? The devil's mind, an idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? Because we're much more exposed to this idle-mindedness. And so there's probably a little bit more propensity for people to be evil in this situation. But generally speaking, if there's no abundance, people have to cooperate to subsist, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not evil in a situation where you have to eat. If I was thinking about this, like if you had to go hunt an animal to eat tonight on your own, that might be a difficult proposition. But if you had 10 guys you're going to want to cooperate, because those 10 guys are going to probably be able to execute that plan, just like a wolf pack. A wolf hunting alone, that's why wolves always operate in packs, right? Humans are pack animals. God made us that way, and we cooperate pretty well together. So I don't believe now, once there becomes a certain amount of abundance, and if there's a one-off who jumps outside the pack, then he's going to have to steal or plunder or become evil to seek his food, to get his shelter, to get his maybe even love. So this supposition that we're all this sinister evil, that's different than being imperfect and sinners, I think, right? We're all imperfect and sinners.
We're all imperfect sinners. And I don't think, it's like, and I get kind of where you're going with, because I've always had this thought of like the anarchist. It's like, well, what about if, the person who's like praising anarchy, it's like, if there was no laws or no, like how would we just be
anarchist
post-apocalyptic, just burning, just cars in the streets and people just always hiding and running for their lives?
That's what people say about libertarians all the time, is that they assume that there's no need for government. No sensible adult human being thinks that you don't need some systems to cooperatively work together. We need that. That's why God gave us this big giant brain, so that we can actually work that stuff out and do it. And at the same time, kind of, I don't want to say punish, but I guess underemphasize the plunderous parts, the evil parts of people who are going to, and reemphasize the people who are cooperative, because that cooperative effort leads to better and better things. Now we've gone over the other side of that, where I think we've become cooperative to the extent where we've got too much abundance.
Yeah.
The pendulum swung way far out. Now it's nothing but plunderous people.
Well, and when we come back to right, they want us to be divided, and they want us to be separated. They don't want us to work together, and they want us to be individuals, like very individualistic, self-serving, not a community.
Right. there's a balance again. Like you can't get to be too successful out of whatever the term, like, right? I mean, too much success almost always leads to something sinister. The doors getting open to evil. Don't you agree?
It's hard. Because if you think about like America, for instance, right? It's like people came over here because they were tired of the systems that were taking place in Europe, right? And the repressiveness of the Catholic Church and, religion. And they said, hey, we want to go over to this new place and do our own thing. And here we are, 200 years later. And within that, there's good and there's bad.
There's
and
good and bad. There's good and
yeah.
bad. There's not just all good.
And there's not just all bad.
No, and it's ebbed and flowed ever since that time, just like everything
and
always
there is
will.
an element of like there is, and this is where like with I feel like especially on the liberal side, they're always talking about how like, oh, you colonists, you came here and you killed all the Indians and you did all these things. But it's like, well, if you go back 1,000 years, it's like progress took place by conquering and so it's like
it's constant evolutionary.
Yes, and I think again, because we live in a fallen world, it'll never just be like this utopian, like peaceful.
It will never. That's what made me kind of question your previous comments about like someday we're just going to get to this promised land. And
I think that's when Jesus said it is finished. That's what he meant, like that he took on that thing, and now we can get to that promised land.
That's maybe what he meant, but the promised land is right here. It's already here.
Well, that's another thing that Jesus.
Place.
That's another thing that Jesus says, that he said the kingdom has come.
Right.
And so it's on earth. Here and now. And again, we can live and we can walk in that, but it's just recognizing it, and again, removing yourself from the equation of, trying to do things on your own efforts and be perfect and all these other kind of things, and allowing Jesus's work on the cross to, take the place.
I just think it goes back a little bit to what we talked about earlier when we were talking about, the paycheck. It's hard to get somebody to understand something when their paycheck depends on it. And you said, once the more and more they get us addicted to money, materialism, status, stuff, vacations, busyness, all this stuff. Once we're so addicted to all those things, we can't see anything else but those things. We're just immersed in that egotistical want. We disconnect from the balance that we have to maintain. So like we almost have to go back to kind of subsistence level living. So all that stuff gets wiped out. We have to kind of start from scratch.
That's the main goal of a Bond villain.
Huh? Bond villain?
Yeah. The main goal of a Bond villain is he has this idea of how the world should be and how society should be. And so it's like he needs to drop the nukes in order to bring balance back to humanity.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I would argue that it has nothing to do with anything outside of us. It has to do with consciousness, because everything comes from consciousness, right? So you could have $20 billion and be wonderfully philanthropic. And you could have only $30,000 to your name and be really stingy and gross, kind of, selfish, all that stuff. So I don't think money or opulence corrupts at all. I think it's consciousness that does that.
I don't know the answer to that question necessarily, but what I do see, I see people with $30,000 who are more philanthropic than any billionaire I've ever seen in my life, right? The true saints of this world, have no material possessions at all. You don't see them a lot, but they're out there, and they're people who just do good work in spite of or despite the fact that they don't have material possessions at all. So that is, I don't know if that addresses what you said or not, but I just think money does corrupt. Mm-hmm. I think
Well, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money.
The love of money.
And so I think that's what corrupts. I'm more online with John, what John's saying, as far as like, I think it's a consciousness thing, and us having abundance and a lot. Because how is a broke person ever going to help somebody else get out of their situation?
Yes, is not be one of them.
Right? Yeah, it's like
so that you can give to them.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on what you define as broke, right? I mean, I don't mean like be a homeless person who doesn't care about anything. I mean, like you have to be able to subsist, right?
Yeah.
You have to be able to eat. You have to be able to protect yourself. You have to be able to put a shelter over your head and all those sorts of things. But our obsession with like this magical, I want to be Elon Musk. I want to be a billionaire. I want to be a millionaire. Like those terms are way too forefront in our mind. Nobody says I want to be a saint. Who is saying I want to be a saint? Who's saying that I want to be?
Yeah, no, and I agree with you in that. And that's where again, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Right. And so it's really about if we seek those things first, the things that actually matter, then all the wealth and all the prosperity and all those other things will come. But if you focus on the wealth or prosperity, then that's where the corruption happens. And then your attitude towards people or life becomes dependent on whether you're succeeding or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, some people say, "Well, I'll do the right thing after I make my $1 million,"
which is backwards, of course.
It's totally backwards,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You'll never, because I think they asked Henry Ford, like when he had $1 billion or something, they're like, "Well, when is it going to be enough?"
Yeah.
His answer was something really dark, like
when
I get to the next billion or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
It'll never
be enough. It's
Bring me those babies' blood.
And that's the love of money thing. I mean, it's just a hook, I think, I mean, I think I'm kind of broke in my life, like financially broke, because if I got a lot of money, I'd be a dick. I'd probably start trampling people. That's probably why God said, this guy doesn't deserve money.
Who do you have to become in order to receive the money, though?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that makes your point that, what was your Bible verse you just said?
But the love of money is the root of all evil?
No,
or seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness?
That's right.
And then all these things will be added unto you? Yeah.
And that's the identity thing that I think you taught, like who we are. Yeah. If you get to that, then I think maybe having
it's
that.
like focus on the right things, right? Like focus on loving each other, focus on, helping those people who are in need, and then all that other stuff will fall into place,
Which is seek first the kingdom of God, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's just putting a practical spin on that. But So I have a 12-week coaching program.
Yeah, exactly. You said you did an in-depth study on they. Right. And so I would like to come. I mean, we've dabbled on some of the they. Oh, yeah. You wrote a book on they?
No, but I gathered the research. I took it pretty seriously.
Okay, next time really you bring all your study on they.
Yeah.
You have another cliffhanger on us?
No, actually, we can't leave on a cliffhanger. We have to have you finish your story.
The previous cliffhanger?
The previous cliffhanger. You're in front of the judge and you're like, screw you. I'm an autonomous human being here on Earth. I'm a sovereign citizen.
I didn't say any of that, just to let you know. Don't try to put words in my mouth, pal. That's not how this works.
No, we were talking. Let's give a quick recap.
So the quick recap is I got a traffic ticket for running a red light, which I did, but I didn't admit that to the cop. This is worth pointing out because I'm not just out there running red lights at random. I looked both ways. I made sure that nobody was
And you're a
in
responsible
peril.
citizen. It's like you can make a decision whether there's no cars around and you can go.
Did I never tell you guys this story?
No. You started on it on the last episode, and we got right to the
before.
So this is great. This is good.
Female cop.
It's right.
She was super hot.
She was.
Mark. You roll down your window and you're like, "Hey, where are you going afterwards?"
All right.
Is that a gun in your pocket? Or?
Yeah, exactly. I'm carrying real big right now.
You wanted John to tell this story and from his point of view.
It'd be a whole different.
Oh
story.
yeah, the John version is a porno in the making.
And then she went around the side of my car and looked under the hood. It was then when I...
Thank you guys for completely pulling the rug out from underneath anything I've got to say.
No, all right, finish the story.
Really
we want to hear the story, okay?
God. I can't follow that. I mean, what am I going to do?
Yes, you can. Well, okay, so we got to the part where she pulled you over.
She pulls me over. I pull into my parking lot in my building. So I'm driving through my whole parking lot. There's no spaces, so I drive across the street to the auxiliary parking lot. She's got her lights on the whole time, and I'm just trying to find a parking space. I go pull into my parking space across the auxiliary lot. I get my stuff. I get out of the car, and she's like, "Wait, what are you doing? Get back in your car!"
Right.
And I didn't want to get shot, so I got back in my car.
Good move.
And she comes up to my window. I roll the window down, and she comes up, and she's like, "What are you doing getting out of your car?" And I said, "Well, I've got every right to get out of my car and go anywhere I want to." And she goes, "You're right." And
good for her.
That probably was the biggest tell on the bluff card that this whole legal system is. That just by itself, me stating I have the right to go anywhere I want, just because she had some red lights on in a car behind me. What authority? This is the thing. We assume that these people have so much authority that we don't really ever contemplate consciously how little. What is the authority other than what we've been scared into believing?
It's just intimidation, right?
It's an intimidation. The whole system is a scare tactic system. I think I've told you guys this before in our mortgage closing packages. There's one document out of the 50 documents. There's one document that doesn't require a signature in there. You know what's on it?
What?
It's just it's a badge. It's an FBI badge. They just put that into every, and I never understood why that was until a few years ago. It's just a scare tactic. It's just to let you know we're watching.
Brand awareness.
It's brand exactly. They love doing this thing to keep us all on our heels, right?
Right. So keep going with the story because I'm interested.
Yeah. So she, I give her my driver's license, and this is part of our, I hand her the driver's license, and I said, "This is not me.
Not for identification.
Not for identification purposes. This is just to state that I authorized by whomever to drive this car." Mm-hmm. I'm trying to not acknowledge the straw man that we've talked about before. That because that acknowledgement that you're the straw man, tucks you into their, or resigns you into their jurisdiction, which I don't want to be either. I'm not perfected on this whole process, but this was the best litmus test that I've ever had because
Black's Law Dictionary, and I know you know this, but driver and passenger, that's straw man language according to Black's Law.
Yeah.
You're actually a traveler and your passenger is a guest. If you start, those terms matter, and they mean. But keep going.
All this terminology matters to them. Black's Law Dictionary and Bovier's Dictionary are both their definitions of things that are very specifically required for us to be knowledgeable about, because once we start speaking their language, that's a whole different language than lay people understand.
Well, and as a traveler and a guest, you have every right in the world as a human being, like if I cut you, you bleed, not a straw man, to go anywhere that God has created freely, without a license, without registration. So anyway,
inalienable rights, right? So I give her that, and she goes and writes me a ticket, and she comes back. Well, she explained. Sorry, I'm jumping around. She asked if I ran the red light. I said no, because she didn't know for sure that I'd run the red light or not, and I didn't know if she knew. And I was trying to find out what evidence she had.
Yeah.
She's like, "Well, I was coming the opposite direction. My light was green, so your light couldn't have been green." I said, "Well, they could have been. They both could have been green.
Yeah.
What do I know? Mine was green, as I just lied and said it was green."
Yeah.
But I said this. I said, "Look, I slowed down and looked both ways to make sure. I'm a very conscientious driver, and I just want you to know that I'm very conscientious of not impinging on anybody else's right to move around or travel or make an accident or anything. So that's my first and foremost thought as I move throughout this world and do anything that I do. So I just want you to know that I'm totally on your side about protecting this community, and I respect the work that you do. And I said, I try to abide by God's laws, and there's 10 of those. And one of those is just not injuring other people or taking their stuff. There's others too. But I said, do you know how many I said, there's 10 of God's laws. Do you know how many Colorado revised statutes there are? And she said, no, I don't know. I said, well, there's at least 100,000. And I have a really hard time just abiding by God's 10. There's no way that I can abide, you or I or anybody else could abide by all 100,000 of those Colorado revised statutes. We're probably breaking those laws on any given day. So it's really hard. I just want you to know that it's really hard for anybody to. But God's laws are just as long as I'm not injuring anybody else. She agreed with that, so I just wanted her to be on the same page.
Yeah.
She didn't think I'm just some raving lunatic, a sovereign citizen who's just trying to kick sand in her face, right? I'm trying to operate from this realm of, or this understanding of, how does Brian put it? I accept your claim. I conditionally accept your claim
Conditional acceptance,
upon proof of contract.
Yeah.
And one thing that this legal realm, the United States corporation wants us, they always want, it's all by contract, right? And so the first thing that they're trying to establish is that you're handing them a driver's license is their first attempt at
drawing you into a contract.
Yeah. The second attempt is you acknowledging your straw man. There's a bunch of attempts to get you contracted. The third attempt is you signing that citation that they give you. And I didn't sign it. She didn't actually require me to sign it, thankfully, but I didn't sign it. But then I went into court, and I just I said to the district attorney, after being coached by Brian, who's coming on this show sometime because he's a really cool guy and a really knowledgeable guy in this legal realm. But he said one thing that you should do is probably challenge them on whether or not they have territorial jurisdiction over the land where they cited you, because they cited me on private property, and they don't have jurisdiction over that property. So they have no right to actually enforce any of their laws on that territory, nor do they have any rights over the street, because the streets are owned by we the people. Those streets are not owned by the municipality of Inglewood. This happened to be Inglewood, which is just a subdivision of the U.S. corporation, by the way. And so we as sovereign entities, or whatever you want to call us, even as U.S. citizens, we don't give a lot of thought to these ideas like who owns the roads? Who's got we the people are who owns those roads, and it'd be a really good investigation to find out who owns the land that's underneath those roads.
Because it's our tax money that's paying for those roads to even be created, because we the people have decided we want roads.
We want roads, but the ownership of those roads is important to understand. The only ownership that the U.S. government, the United States corporation owns, this is an interesting thing to investigate. They own that little 10 square mile District of Columbia thing, and then they own like the Fed Center here is owned by them. They own the courthouse of the Inglewood, the city of Inglewood. They own that courthouse land, but they don't own the roads. And so they don't have territorial jurisdiction over anything except for that land ownership. That's one way that you can get them off their demand that you're under contract with them, because they don't have jurisdiction. So I pushed on the district attorney and I said, I want you to prove that you have territorial jurisdiction. He's like, what? I'm like, you know what I'm talking about. I want you to prove that and then get back to me. And so I left the first court hearing. I wasn't in court, but I just had a pretrial conference with him, and I told him that. And then I went away. And then I came back on the scheduled court date, and I said, so did you determine that? And he's like, well, no, I didn't. But let me just ask you, are you willing to have this knocked down to? I'm like, no, I want to go in front of the judge. He's like, well, what if we do X, Y, Z? I'm like, no, I want to go in front of the judge. And he kept backing down more and more and more. The more I pushed on wanting to go in front of that judge, he knew that I knew something. And again, I wasn't versed enough to really push this to the nth degree, but I pushed it to the point where I got what I wanted. Like, I got it knocked down to just a small fee. That's all they're ever trying to accomplish, by the way, is just to get a fee out of you. That's all that system is ever trying to do, is just to try to squeeze a fee out of you. Whether it's a fine, if the bigger the fee they can get from you, the better. If they want to add points to, it was a 6-point ticket. He dropped all the points down, and I ended up paying like a $50 fee in the end after
It's like a sleazy car salesman.
It's exactly what it is.
It's like, let me go talk to my boss. And then he comes back like, sorry, we can't get that price any lower. And it's like, well, what if we do X, Y, and Z? It's like, let me go talk to my boss.
Get you in that car for today.
Yeah, exactly. What the heck is going on here?
Well, it's strictly commerce. I mean, that's the truth of it. So it's just a negotiation. It has nothing to do with justice or with protecting people because you might run a red light and hit an old lady. Or it has nothing to do with that.
They are just attempting to collect a fee from you and to keep you scared to some extent. That whole fear.
Yeah, the FBI piece of paper.
The FBI thing.
That's wild.
I mean, once you start poking holes in their credibility, though, that balloon starts to deflate fast. And that's why white blood cells, like this guy talks about, if I could teach people the laws of evidence in about 2 hours time, he's not an attorney, because to be an attorney is to be the wrong. You're in the system if you're an attorney. If you're a bar registered attorney, you're part of the system. You are they. Yes. But you have to understand the law, common law, right? And he's saying, like, if you understand the rules of evidence, that's a really basic starting place. He said, I could teach people that in about 2 hours.
Who's this guy?
He's in the PAC Alliance group. There's a lot of these guys that all say the same thing that are all very similarly oriented, and everybody calls these people wacko because they don't believe that you should just go hire an attorney. Hiring an attorney is an admission that you do not have standing, and it's also per Black's
But that's, every like serial killer, wacko, tax evader represents themselves.
They all represent themselves, but the problem with what's his name, the black guy, the actor who tried to not pay his IRS taxes, he gets referred
Wesley Snipes.
Snipes. Everybody references him because I'm not saying you could be stupid and defend yourself. You have to know the law. You have to know how they're going to trap you. Their web of weirdness is complex, so you have to know how they're going to trap you, and that takes a certain amount of understanding. And that legal understanding is very tied in with biblical understanding. Like, you didn't just read the Bible one night and all of a sudden everything was in you. It takes a lifetime of understanding. Yeah. And that's, I think, what their point is. This guy that he's like, I'm going to start you with the laws of evidence, the rules of evidence. Then you must just continue on with that understanding of law, because law ties in with philosophy and religion and the Bible, and that understanding of all those things has been pulled away from us so that we are just children. We are at the mercy of they.
Right. There's a section, and I've mentioned this before, that I'm going to find, darn it, before the next episode. And that is, there's a section in the Bible that says that basically God's saying, if you follow my laws, I got your back. Under any circumstances, always. If you follow man's laws, you're on your own. Tough shit.
Colorado
basically.
Revised Statutes versus biblical law, right?
Yeah, and it's pretty black and white in the Bible. There's not a lot of interpretation that has to happen. And I learned that in one of my sovereignty, crazy old cynical old men groups. But yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. And I was listening to this guy, his name is Michael Coccini, I think, or something like that. And he talks about that even on a spiritual level of things that take place to us, like he gets a little bit out there as far as some of the demon stuff and some other things like that, but it is all about law and contracts and the enemy going to God and saying, hey, look at so-and-so broke this law, like we're able to go and tempt him or do X, Y, and Z. And he talks it about in a very legal way, and because that's how heaven is governed by these laws, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. So at the end of the day, you just got a ticket with a couple
I
buck,
paid the
buck
fine
fine.
just
Okay.
because I didn't know how far I could push it, and I didn't actually want to screw up the progress that I'd made. But it was one of the best kind of beta tests I've ever done to kind of reveal the fact that they are bluffing. They're bluffing.
Right.
Now,
We need to get you to break some more laws so we can beta test more of these things, you know?
Let's do that.
What was the original fee? It was 6 points plus
like $250, plus he wanted to make me go take some driving class.
So you got it down to
I got it down
$50
to, I got
and
it
no
no
points
no
and no
class,
class.
and $50. Yeah, so it was a pretty
I'd say you
productive.
did well.
It took
Yeah.
me 30 minutes to go in. Like it didn't take me any time, but I did consult with Brian. Thank God for Brian, and thank God for this, exposure to kind of some of this legal system. Because, dude, that's like getting exposed to the Bible. Before I knew about the Bible, I'm just flying blind, just accepting everybody else's idea of what I should be doing with my life, instead of recognizing there is a pretty fundamental truth to this universe, and a lot of it's in that book.
Yeah.
Right? If not all of it.
Yeah, I it's interesting to me, even all this stuff, because I was thinking about it. I went shooting with my son, and I today, and I had our guns in the car, and I had a sense of I was a little nervous, oh, what if I get pulled over? But I was thinking, wait a second, it's my right to have these weapons in my vehicle and to have them to protect myself, my family, or whatever I want to do. Why should I be afraid or worried or concerned that I have these guns in my car? So I was just thinking about how
they've built that.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the other thought was all these laws and rules that they're putting in place in Colorado specifically. Oh, you can't have an automatic weapon, you can't have a magazine that holds more than 5 bullets. All these rules and regulations around owning the gun. I'm
Do they ever remove any of those rules or regulations?
No.
That's what I was
No,
thinking.
they just keep adding layer upon layer. You'll never be able to get your arms around that shit.
Yeah.
How could you?
And then part of me's again, can I just be F you?
Well,
you can't do that because courts see cases. I mean, it's eligible for a court case if there's conflict. That's why the conditional acceptance. What's it called? The tacit agreement.
Tacit agreement's a different thing, but I think that it's kind of an honorable way to approach it. Is you're acknowledging their claim conditionally. You're saying I conditionally accept your claim
if you can prove that I shouldn't be carrying
proof that I shouldn't be carrying this or doing this or whatever their claim is. They have to. If you put the ball in their court to prove their claim, they never have justification to do it because they're never based in. For example, Mike running the red light. If I didn't injure anybody, that's God's law. If you injure somebody, well, that's
right.
That's not right.
Yeah.
You can't injure other people. You can't take their stuff. That's a God's law. As long as you're not doing that, you haven't defied. You carrying around a gun, you haven't injured anybody.
Right.
You have every right to be in defense of yourself. If somebody else tries to take your stuff, that's your right to defend yourself, right?
Yeah. We need to get this guy on here. We need your expert. What's his name?
Brian Pratt.
Brian Pratt, you're getting officially called out, dude.
Yeah.
You come on the White Blood Cells podcast. You said 2 hours.
He's our ultimate white blood cell. He's a self-sufficient guy. He built his own house. He's got a whole solar system heating his house. He's off the grid. He's almost to the point.
Does he live in the middle of nowhere, in the sticks?
He lives in Woodland Park,
Oh,
Colorado,
nice.
right next to Pikes Peak.
Okay, yeah, living the
Pretty cool
dream.
spot. He's living the dream. He is. Anyway, we'll definitely have him on. Brian, you're coming, man.
Awesome.
How we doing?
I feel like this was a great episode. We talked a lot of stuff. We went deep.
Yeah.
And
Only one F-bomb?
we had a couple, but one big one. That was a nice one.
Jim Cramer brings out the best in me. What can I say? We'll invite Jim on. Now, Jim, if you're watching, open invitation, my friend.
He's such a doofus. That guy annoys me just looking at him.
He's got to be expiring soon. I mean, he seems a little
Expired.
yeah, just very Yeah, he's old.
They're gonna keep sprinkling fairy dust on him.
Right.
So yeah, they'll prop him up no matter what.
he's
Fucking
just
Windsocks.
drinking those, baby blood
Right, exactly.
shots before every episode.
He's got a good pair of knee pads. That's all I
A
know.
windsock with knee pads.
That's his mascot.
We
all
should
right.
heckle him in the background at the cameras. Find out where he's shooting.
Good point. Yeah.
Knee pads and windsocks.
All right, what's our call to action?
Subscribe.
That's right.
Thumbs up. We need subscribers, don't we?
Yeah, always. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up icon so you get notified every single time.
And to the Twitch crowd, we'll be live streaming next time, right, Mark?
Yeah,
We'll get
we're
our
really going to
bugs
start
worked out.
to hop on and live stream to multiple places so that you guys can hang out with us in real time. Maybe even throw in some questions.
Yeah,
you
some
wanted to
Q&A
throw in
would be
some
good.
questions and whatnot. And,
Yeah.
and then we got a special guest coming in on the next episode, I think.
Yeah,
right?
we do. Craig,
So-
I'm going to screw his last name
That's
up,
all
so I
right.
won't
Craig,
do it.
he's going to
Craig-
be here. That'll
Craig
be cool.
the Shrink.
Yeah.
I know that shrinks love to be called shrinks.
Okay,
So Craig the
nice.
Shrink. No, he's a really good dude, and he will be talking about some identity stuff, I have a feeling.
Shrinky stuff.
Some shrinky stuff, some med stuff. So,
Right on.
yeah, looking forward to
Yeah.
that for sure.
Awesome. All right.
All
Well,
right.
hey, until next time.
Peace.
Out.
Oh, yeah, we need like a thing.
Right. Yeah. You got to develop a thing to